Before I begin this video, I just want to preface by saying that the content and topic I'm speaking about is not, in any way, aimed to be an attack at Cars 2 Deluxe or its creator, Risky VR. This is an informational video about Deluxe, which will explain what it is, what it aims to be, and any concerns and misconceptions surrounding the project. Now, with that out of the way, it's time to proceed to the rest of the video. Yo, what is going on, everybody? Welcome back to another video where I kind of stray away from my usual content, my guides, my showcases, and instead, I'm going to be speaking on a project that you may all have already heard about, which is Cars 2 Deluxe. Cars 2 Deluxe has gotten a ton of traction recently, and I actually have a lot that I want to inform you about when it actually comes to that project. So without further ado, I want to first briefly talk about what Cars 2 Deluxe is and aims to be. So first things first, as the description of the project states, Cars 2 Deluxe aims to be a full restoration of the HD version of Cars 2 the video game for PC, providing a much better experience with high fidelity graphics, assets, resolutions, and higher frame rates, as well as some other quality of life fixes and tweaks to make it a bit more accurate to the console release. However, I can see that there are a lot of things that Deluxe fails to explain to its users beyond what it does in its description, and I'm here to speak on those things as well as address any misconceptions or controversies surrounding it. Before I address any of those things, let's quickly talk about why Cars 2 Deluxe has been growing in popularity in the first place. Well, that popularity is due to one simple fact. Cars 2 on PC finally got fixed. What do I mean by that? Well, basically, Cars 2 Deluxe is the version of Cars 2 that everyone has always wanted on PC. For most of you watching this video, you are probably already aware of just how horrific the PC port is. While the PC port is definitely based on the Wii version, there are plenty of other reasons beyond that which make it inferior to even the Wii version itself. So for example, Cars 2 PC has a ton of rendering issues with certain effects, such as the machine gun bullets, the missile trails, even the turbo flames. They all just end up disappearing on some sections on certain tracks. Some scenes are also just completely unfinished or messed up. Take Airport Arena for example. This is an egregious example of this. Just load it up and you'll see that tons of assets, such as the skybox elements, and even plenty of objects that are supposed to be just sitting around, are completely missing. Tracks such as Italy also do not render properly, and it appears to have very poor render distance. There are so many other issues with the PC version, such as Hunter missing the Professor Z boss fight, attack mode using the wrong enemies, as well as the horrible audio loop bug, which completely crashes your game. And let's not forget the lack of 4-player support. There's only 2 players, and it seems as if Deluxe corrects almost all of these issues and concerns with the PC version, right? And I'm sure that because of this, a lot of you are seeing Deluxe as the Cars 2 equivalent to something like Unleashed Recompiled. However, that's not exactly the case, and there are plenty of statements like these that I keep seeing that are causing tons of confusion to both people in and out of the community. So for those of you that don't know what Unleashed Recompiled is, I'll quickly go over it. Unleashed Recompiled is a recompilation of the Xbox 360 version of Sonic Unleashed for PC. It allows you to play the original experience natively on your PC with all the DLC, while also being capable of running the game at unlocked frame rates and resolutions, as well as being able to tinker around with your graphics, which basically makes it the definitive version of the game by far, even surpassing a lot of Sega's own remasters or re-releases in quality. Now, let's return to Cars 2 Deluxe. Cars 2 Deluxe didn't actually go through the same situations as Unleashed Recompiled, and the way Deluxe is packaged also gives off the idea that it's a mod for PC. However, that isn't the case either. Cars 2 Deluxe is actually just a compilation of modifications made to the arcade version of Cars 2. The modifications being used are Pentane, Arcade Essentials, and Cars 2 restorations. which I'll get back to in a second because you're probably wondering, hold on, there's a version of Cars 2 for arcade machines? Yes, there actually is. And this port is effectively an even lesser port than the PC one, despite looking visually identical to the Xbox 360 and PS3 versions. Arcade actually strips away everything that makes the game fun and unique. Do you want drifting, backwards driving, two-wheeling, side bashing, even air tricking? Well, tough luck because that's all been completely removed. Do you want to play hunter, attack, survival, maybe battle races? You're out of luck, seeing as the game forces you to play selectively on race mode and only for a maximum of 2 laps. Oh, and I almost forgot to mention, did you know that there are only 5 tracks available in arcade as well? Even if you somehow mod the game to add the rest of the track slots, only 6 of those tracks will load. And that's because Raw Thrills, the developers behind the arcade port, removed any of the remaining track assets that they weren't using. So with this in mind, the reason you see Deluxe playing as if it were the Xbox 360 or PS3 version is due to all of the modifications I mentioned above. But what are these modifications? What purpose do they actually serve? Well, for starters, let's first talk about Arcade Essentials. Arcade Essentials is the single-handedly most important aspect of why something like Deluxe even exists. Arcade Essentials, or as I'm going to refer to it as AE, is made by It's Me FT24, and it is a Pentane plugin for Cars 2 Arcade version 1.42 that restores a significant amount of critical base game functionality. So what exactly does that mean? Well, in short, AE effectively patches dozens of functions within Arcade to get it to play closer to the Xbox 360/PS3 releases. A full list can be found on the GitHub page linked in the description below if you want to take a look at absolutely everything that got changed. So, I mentioned how AE is a Pentane plugin, but what is Pentane? Fortunately, that is a lot simpler to explain. Pentane, which is also made by FT, is a user configurable plugin loader and modding framework for currently supported games. One of those supported games being Cars 2 Arcade. To explain what I just said in simpler terms, it just allows mod developers to create plugins that modify or even add functionality to the game, and it allows said plugins to load and take into effect once the game is booted. And that's exactly why, if you boot Cars 2 Arcade without Pentane, you can't really play the game at all. You're either locked into a screen calling for maintenance, or you're stuck in the game's attract videos. Pentane allows this to be bypassed by loading a plugin like Arcade Essentials, effectively letting users take more control over the game. Now, for the final mod, Cars 2 Restorations. This one is just as easy, maybe even easier to explain than Pentane. Essentially, Cars 2 Restorations is just a mod that I uploaded that currently restores all of the missing maps that got removed in Cars 2 Arcade, hence the name Cars 2 Restorations. And thanks to various scripts that FT made for swapping OCT endianness and plenty of other conversion features, I was able to use them and my knowledge of how this game's scenes work to be able to restore the maps in pretty much their full glory. Now that you know that Deluxe is currently powered by these 3 modifications, I want you to take these misconceptions and concerns into account. First things first, let's address some of the concerns with mods like AE and Cars 2 Restorations. Both mods are currently lacking in some areas that currently have not or cannot be addressed. For example, while AE and Cars 2 Restorations restore a lot of the base game's core features and functionality, there are still a lot of issues with certain things like asset rendering. Quickly hop into a race of high tour and you'll see that some objects are rendering above others incorrectly, at least in the intros. Maps like Oil Rig Arena and Italy Arena have incorrect or unfinished shaders. You can see plenty of background objects and elements like the water just not rendering properly. And this is due to Arcade most likely being that early development build of Cars 2 that I spoke about. There are dozens of bugs and features that just weren't fixed simply because Avalanche didn't intend for this build to end up in the hands of the public. Speaking of bugs, There are dozens of them that we, at the moment of this video, currently have 0 leads on, meaning that they won't be addressed really anytime soon. I'll show off some of these bugs right now. Here's one of the bugs. As you can see, the Lemon AI are not rendering properly. They're kind of just solid colors. And here's another bug. You have the Hunter mode stats not tracking properly. As you can see, I took down Professor Z, but the stats did not track. There's also the fact that everything in the game comes unlocked by default, and there are a very few select amount of badges and crests that are actually able to be tracked. The rest don't get tracked at all. There are also a couple bugs related to map objects either being stuck at the very origin of the map or just not being able to interact with the player properly. One such example is the London train. The London train doesn't send the player flying when hitting them, and if you play survival mode, you'll notice that the player's shield will be stuck at the origin of the map and won't follow the player. All of these issues, of course, don't affect the gameplay a whole lot, but these are problems that you really need to take into account. So one of the absolute biggest concerns I have with Deluxe, however, revolves around Pentane. Remember when I mentioned earlier that Pentane is a mod loader for supported games? Currently, there are only a handful of supported games, 2 of which are Cars 2 PC and Cars 2 Arcade respectively. Most of you probably thought that Deluxe was a mod for PC or a recompiled version for PC. So what would happen if you were to go to FT's GitHub page and download the PC version of Pentane because you just weren't aware of the arcade version? Well, that would completely break your install of Cars 2, rendering it completely unplayable. And Deluxe does not clarify this. It's also very, very important to install the correct version of Pentane, even more so than being up to date. However, being up to date is still very important, as Pentane at any moment could provide new features or have some major changes to its API. And while I don't think future updates will break many or really any existing plugins, it's still very important to keep that in mind. Being up to date is very important, and that's why you either have to choose to stick with Deluxe's versions of Arcade Essentials and Pentane or with FT's original versions. Another thing that Deluxe fails to clarify is that it strips the arcade install of all of its DLL files. These DLL files are located in the root directory where the game's executable is, and their purpose is to essentially execute core functionality within the game, and because they've been omitted, you must either get them from either the arcade assets that are somewhere on the internet or the vanilla PC or Steam installs. Most people have indeed ended up doing the latter, which ends up making them further believe that they're playing on a modified version of the PC port. As you just saw, Cars 2 Deluxe is really just a culmination of currently existing mods. There are a few changes made to Deluxe, such as the final cutscene of the game having proper audio, and the audio in arcade being replaced with PS3's audio files, mainly because they're higher quality than arcade's audio. But besides that, Deluxe is pretty much one-to-one to what already exists. And while Deluxe does offer a modified version of AE, the modification doesn't actually change any features. It just allows you to override the original Steam release game files with the ones Deluxe uses, which at that point you're effectively replacing the PC port with arcade entirely. You also want to take into account that while this modification may be small, the code could still be different enough to where you as the user have to make the decision to continue updating Deluxe's version of Pentane and Arcade Essentials or the original versions. The original version of Arcade Essentials already has a couple updates promised on the way, but for Deluxe, you'll have to ask the creator of the project if they intend to maintain their version of Arcade Essentials. Differences in code mean that Deluxe's versions of Arcade Essentials and Pentane may not be completely compatible with the original versions made by FT. And while Deluxe could attempt to update itself by pasting in Arcade Essentials new updates automatically, somewhere down the line, that code that Deluxe is using from Arcade Essentials could be significantly altered or changed. So I guess that clears everything up. If you've watched this video thus far, you've finally learned the truth behind Cars 2 Deluxe. The truth is that it is just a project for the arcade port. It's not PC, It's not a recompilation. It's just another project aiming to make further modifications to arcade, making it closer to console. And while the modifications aren't drastic, and there is still a lot to be done to differentiate Deluxe from Arcade Essentials and Cars 2 Restorations, it still exists. And all this information that I've given you today has to be clarified. Without this video to clarify what this project actually is and what it's actually doing, I'm sure most of you would have still been confused in the long run. I hope you all enjoyed this video, and I'm hoping this video proved to be informational and that I was able to clear things up and mitigate more of the confusion you all may have had or will have. If you have any more questions or concerns, leave them down in the comments below. I'll try to address anything as much as I can, and with that, I'll see you guys in the next one.